If you're seeing this clip, you're about to watch a video that I shot about either the introduction to or the dismantling and repair of a Fostex 250. Please be aware that I actually had problems getting this unit to work properly. So I'm going to put a video link in the description where I explain where my refurbishment of this model ground to a halt, because I don't want you to spend tens of minutes watching my content thinking, oh yeah, great machine, I might go and get one of those, not realising that I got stuck with this despite having quite a lot of experience. So please check out the link and then continue to watch. Thank you. Welcome back to Tetrakan Super Monoblock. Let's have a look at the Fostex 250. How would I pronounce that? Not sure. Take a look at its specifications and features, where it fits in the canon of 4-track recorders, and talk about any service issues that you need to look out for if you're thinking about buying one. To the best of the information that I could find, this was released in 1981, so maybe about 2 years later than the Teac 144 and about a year before the Tascam 244. Those are the two closest to equivalent 4-tracks that I can think of. Like the 144 and the 244, it's got analog VU meters, relatively simple digital display with just a reset button and a zero return button. Zero return would mean that, say the counter was showing 20, you hit rewind with zero return activated, then it'll stop at about 0. So that spares you from doing a lot of fast forwarding and rewinding in order to find the beginning of a song or the point where you're going to be punching in. Also, like the 144 and the 244, we have piano touch buttons. It's single speed. The speed is 3 3/4 inches per second, so that's double the speed of a conventional cassette that you would buy from a record store up to the 1990s when they started to phase out cassette as a commercial medium. Flip top cassette door. There's a little button here that detects whether a cassette is present, and a switch up here to test whether you've removed the tab here to prevent recording. For record arm tracks here, and something that's interesting about this one, and actually an advantage compared to the 244 certainly, and I'm trying to remember the 144, it's been a while since I worked on one of those, but certainly with the 244 you have the option of recording an odd track and an even track at the same time, so either tracks 1 or 3 with either tracks 2 or 4. And then there's a mode where you can record 4 tracks simultaneously, but you can't record 3 tracks at a time. Whereas the way that this one's laid out, you can record 1 track, 2 track, 3 track, or all 4 tracks simultaneously. The layout of the mixer is slightly different to what I'm used to, having really only covered Porta Studios before on this channel. Typically on a Porta Studio you would find that the gain for the input channels at the top. The tape cue mix tends to be over here or in a central area here, but on this unit the gain controls are down here close to the fader, which I guess kind of makes sense because you've got the things that set the gain stage to tape all in one area. Then this one at the top, that's your tape cue. That allows you to set up a monaural mix, which is independent of the gain structure. So that allows you to monitor in a way that isn't going to affect what you hear back from tape after tracking. Like a 244 and a 144, there's a stereo effects bus. They send returns around the back here. I'll get to all the inputs and output sockets in a minute. And stereo receive is set here at a master level. 2-band EQ, really different 2-band EQ to either the 144 or the 244. On the 144 there's a low and high shelf, on the 244 there's a low, mid and high mid parametric EQ. This one's a weird combination. I'm not necessarily saying weird like bad, but you've got a 300 Hz and below shelving EQ, and then you've got a fixed frequency 4K control. So like a high mid and a much higher than usual low shelf. Like most low shelves are gonna shelf away things maybe 120 Hz at the most, but a lot of them, the frequency where it begins to slope off is like 60 to 80 Hz, so that's quite high. It's not that that's not usable, but one of the main applications for the high and low shelf that you would have on a Teac 144 is that you can use the high shelf to compensate for the loss of high end due to noise reduction, and you can use the low shelf to get rid of rumble from a mic. And if you try and use this in that way, you're going to cut away a lot of the low end of your instrument, along with the rumble. And 4 kilohertz, if you're not familiar with that kind of thing, that's really like the contact, sibilance, all the kind of scratch and harmonics on a guitar. It's not the high end sizzle that tends to get a little bit masked when you use noise reduction, which would be more like 8K to 10K and up. So bit of a strange choice, I think, by the designers of this machine, but it certainly sounds very nice. Some EQs, you add it in, it starts to sound a bit nasty, but I mean, these sound pleasant. They're just not operating on the part of the frequency range that I would think was optimal for the sort of purposes that someone would be using one of these, home recording. Your headphone controls this weird kind of two-way system. So you turn it that way and you're listening to what's happening from these faders. But you turn it that way and you're monitoring the mix that you set according to these blue knobs up here. The 4-chan bus switches, which are on a per mixer channel basis, allow you to turn the channel off, or you assign the bus to either tracks 1 to 2 or tracks 3 to 4. So this is a routing facility during tracking. So you set it to 1 to 2, then if you pan control, this is your pan control here, the yellow one, you set that hard right, then you're assigning the input from this mixer channel to tape track 2. Whereas if you turn it hard left, then you're going to track 1. Similarly, if you hit that switch over there, so it's pointing to 3, 4, left is track 3 and right is track 4. So that gives you quite a bit of versatility. You could, for instance, set all 4 of these to tracks 1, 2, plug in 4 mics to pick up some sort of stereo picture of a drum kit, say, and then set maybe your stereo mics are hard left and right to give a wide stereo image, but then you've got like bass drum just off to that side of the center of the image, and your snare mic that side, and then all of that's going to be recorded onto 2 tracks and still leave you 2 tracks to play with. Something I find more slightly unusual, being more used to Tascam units, is that that switch also needs to be set to one of the 1, 2 or 3, 4 buses in order to play back in remix modes. At the same horizontal level, we have this meter control, and that's just letting you choose whether these meters are going to give you the input that's coming from the mixer or from the cassette player itself. Recorder is from the cassette. And then finally we have these switches. In line mic mode, then the faders are affecting whatever going into 4 1/4-inch jacks here. There are also RCA jacks along the back. If I turn this around now, we can talk a little bit about all these inputs and outputs. For each of the 4 channels and tracks, bearing in mind that the mixers are channels, it's tracks on a tape, we have a direct out, which is so that you can use the mixer independently of the tape player. So using the direct out, you could use this as a preamp stage for the sound card for a computer, for instance. And we have a record end, so if you want to put a line level signal bypassing the preamp and introduce that to be recorded to cassette, you can do that. And then there's tape out. Usually you would use that for calibration purposes, but I suppose if you wanted to capture the raw sound of the tape without it passing through the mixer, say you'd recorded to cassette and then you wanted to simultaneously capture the 4 tracks of the tape into a digital audio workstation and then mix and master it in the digital domain, then that would be possible. And then we have auxiliary send, which is mono, and auxiliary return, which is stereo, and then our line out. And we also have the mono mix out, so that corresponds to the blue knobs on the other side. And then there's a punch in out jack socket here, so you can use one of those change the amplifier channel on your guitar amplifier style stomp switches to punch in and out. And then on the rear of the unit, turning on and off your Dolby C noise reduction can be accomplished with this switch. Briefly coming back to these pan controls, when you're in mixer mode, then your 4 tracks, 1, 2, 3, 4, are passing through channels 1, 2, 3, 4 of the mixer, and you're using these to set where they sit in the stereo image. So that is both a routing control in tracking mode, or in mix mode, then it's a stereo image control. So in terms of service issues, what to look out for when you're buying one of these, I'm coming at this from an angle where I've spent a lot of time fixing up the 244 and more time attempting to fix Teac 144s than I have spent working on this. I would say that this is a better bet than a Teac 144. I personally prefer the 244. I think the EQs are better. Doesn't look as cool. I do like the way this one looks, but the main reason that I would advise you towards a 244 is that there are quite a lot of aftermarket parts you can get. Like, although I show you in other videos how to use quite cheap parts in a 244, if you didn't want to go to that bother, there's pinch rollers available, there's belt kits. It's quite well established by myself and several other people on YouTube and various blogs on the internet how you go about servicing that unit. This isn't mine. I've got it in for a client, and I've got the cassette player working, but not as well as I might like. I'll be doing videos showing the process of refurbishing the cassette player, but what I found was that the reel mechanism, so there's a separate motor going via a belt to a little kind of arm with a single idler tire on it, and that controls where this take up and supply reel spin. That mechanism seems to be very sensitive to the belt tension that you put on it. I tried 3 different tensions of belt. They're all about the same size but slightly different thickness, and one of them's working pretty well, though occasionally after I've been in rewind mode and I press play, this will get stuck and it won't turn, and so you have to be pretty vigilant with this particular unit. Watch and make sure after you press play that that is turning, and if it's not, then press stop, take the cassette out and wind it on before all the tape starts to build up here, and eventually you would get tape chew from that. And so without Fostex providing that part specifically, if you're going to refurbish one of these, you're going to have to do a bit of experimentation with that belt size. I mean, the capstan belt, that's the belt from the capstan motor that turns a flywheel behind there that's turning this capstan pin. That was no problem. The pinch roller on it is pretty easy to remove the roller itself. It's very like a 244, but the brass core inside it, it's not smooth. It's got 3 stepped surfaces, so when I did the trick that I've shown in another video of putting the rubber from a cheaper pinch roller onto it, I found that the surface of it was actually slightly bumpy. That doesn't seem to be affecting the performance of it, but it just made it a lot harder to perform the pinch roller swap. In terms of the construction of the thing, I had a couple of these years ago when I didn't really know what I was doing very well. What I noticed with them was there were a lot of broken plastic mounting posts. Now, you can spin weld that, and I show how to do that in my channel, but the reason that I think that comes up often in this model is it's quite heavy. It's about maybe 8 kilograms, so close to the weight of a Tascam 244, but unlike a Tascam 244, which has an internal metal chassis, this doesn't. Most of the heavy items are just screwed directly onto the plastic, so it's susceptible to damage in that way, so that's something you might have to fix if you bought one of these. It's not all that easy to dismantle either. Say you needed to get in here and, with this one, the mixer was really filthy, so it needed to get clean. One of the faders was cutting out altogether, so I had to desolder that, pry it apart, clean it and resolder it to the circuit board. That wasn't all that easy to do. It was quite tricky to dismantle, quite time consuming to dismantle. The same tasks on a 244 are easier to do. So it's not such a nice project, especially for a newcomer, as a Tascam 244 is. However, you'd be much better with one of these than the Teac 144. The Teac 144 is a nightmare. The reel mechanism, there's things that go wrong in there that until somebody starts 3D printing some of the plastic parts, really, for the meantime, not repairable. And although this is hard to take apart, the Teac 144 is worse. None of the 3 units like this that I've had really bad electrical work needing done. I mean, dirty faders, dirty mixer, but no failed capacitors that were causing like really bad ground problems. Whereas I've had, I think, 4 Teac 144s. First one I got was more or less pristine. All I needed to do was a belt change and it worked great. But the other 3, they all had earth problems. And so that means really a recap. And that means deconstructing it, and deconstructing it's a real pain. So faced with the 3 choices of this sort of generation of 4 tracks, a 244, this Fostex 250, or a Teac 144, I would avoid the Teac 144. I would choose the Tascam 244, but if you're really invested in the look of this thing, I do think this is the nicest looking of the three. Though you can probably tell from all this fabric and everything, I've got pretty loud, childish taste for colour and everything, so this orange and, you know, this is right up my street. But, you know, if you got a deal on one and you're prepared to invest a little bit of work, then it's not a bad option. So I'm going to be doing some more detailed videos about servicing this. If you're new to the channel, please have a look. I do a lot of mainly maintenance and repair videos to date, but I'm starting to move into more demonstration recordings and home recording topics. So please give the channel a like and a subscribe if that sounds good. And thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again.